So good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to day 4 of the Fanshawe Care Series. Thank you for coming back and joining us. Today we have Jason with us, and he's from our housing department, and he's going to talk to us today a little bit about some housing tips and tricks when searching for a place and some lease information. So I'll hand that over to Jason. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. Excited that you're all coming here very soon, and hopefully I won't have to see you too much. That would mean that your housing might need some help. So hopefully the information that I give you today will assist you in looking for housing, but also maintaining your housing as well. So I'm going to just open up my slide deck, run through a couple slides of information just regarding of what to do for when you're looking and then before you sign a lease. And then I will open up the platform for questions as well. Okay, just give me 1 second. And Crystal, I'm just going to count on you to make sure that the slides are all moving and you can let me know. Good? Great. Excellent. So, as I said, I do off-campus housing within London, Ontario. I also assist with students who are in St. Thomas, Woodstock, and Simcoe. So anything related to off-campus. So as it pertains to residence, if some of you are debating moving into residence, which also is an exceptional idea and a really good option for a lot of people, then that would not be myself. But of course, always happy that if you are in residence to connect you to the best, most responsible person or the best person that would be able to assist you within your housing needs there at residence. So a big part of my job, I work with international as well as domestic students regarding their housing. So a lot of the things that I do is document review. So for example, if you're signing a lease and you're unaware of like what certain clauses mean or particular paragraphs mean, I'm happy to go over that and review that with you. I just really want to preface that I am not a lawyer. So anything that if you're seeking legal advice, I'm always able to assist in connecting with free legal services within London, Ontario to help you assist with any legal questions. But pretty much in Ontario, they do use a standard lease for all individuals renting units. So it's something that I'm very familiar with, and I'd be a good first point of contact to go over that with you. Secondly, I do a lot of roommate mediation. So many of you might be moving into a space where there's 3 or 4 units, and just due to culture and different expectations and night owls and early birds, there is a lot of things which we'll get into later that might consist of needing roommate mediation just to ensure that you all are in a space that where everyone is happy and thriving within their studies. I do landlord mediation. So if you're working with a landlord that you feel is not working and doing their duty as a proper landlord within London, Ontario, I'm always able to go over the situation with you prior to meeting with the landlord and then connecting with the landlord on your behalf or with you to engage in a starting conversation about what we can do to make sure all parties are happy. And then lastly, I'm able just to provide connections to school resources. So, you know, you're doing a lot of orientation. There might be some things that you forget or you weren't able to attend, but I would be able to, while talking about your housing, send you to proper referrals like counseling or accessibility or anything of that nature. So then that way you're not being bounced around the college as much. So when looking for a place, there's kind of 5 things that we should be taking into consideration when you're looking at looking for an apartment or renting a house. The first one is cost. So the costs of apartments are increasing a lot in London, Ontario. So in order to rent a room, it could be about 550 Canadian to about $800 Canadian per month. This is quite expensive. There are a lot of individuals who are actually renting rooms within rooms at about 450 a month, which is something that I don't encourage because it gets sticky with leases. But 550 to about 800. So always just try to use your currency converter of like what that value might be for you per month because it does does add up to be quite a lot of money. And if your budget is a little bit more extensive and you have a little bit more room to play with in terms of your housing, apartments here for a bachelor's apartment to a one-bedroom apartment are about 1,000 to 1,300. Now, 1,300 is an average. There are some one bedrooms that are going for $2,200 Canadian. There are some one bedrooms that are going for $900 Canadian. So just really try to look at the location, which we'll go over later in terms of bus routes and stuff like that, of what would be best suitable for you and your living arrangement as well as your budget. It's also really important that when you're looking at apartments, that sometimes the rental amount isn't the full amount of what you owe per month. So sometimes leases will say utilities all inclusive. So all inclusive means that your hydro, electricity, your water are covered by the landlord. And so you would not need to have to pay those additional costs per month. There are some cases where only water and electricity are covered, and therefore you might have to pay for your hydro. So then you would need to make connections to London Hydro or Enbridge Gas in order to help set that up. So just to make sure that when you're looking at the lease, utilities included versus not included might add about like $150 additionally per month to your living budget if you do not get a unit that is all inclusive. Some spaces do provide Wi-Fi as all inclusive as well, but that is not standard, nor is it mandatory. So you might be lucky in that you are renting a space where all utilities are included plus internet, which means that your housing costs are just the total amount that are on your lease. But in most cases, all of those utilities are not included. In terms of hydro, if you were to have to pay hydro, it would average about 50 to 60 or 40 to $65 per month that you would have to pay your hydro bill for. That bill could become higher and higher and higher if you're sharing a house with several other students, at which point the hydro bill could be much more expensive than that. So then you would have to work with your roommates on what that looks like in terms of shared costs. So to reduce rent, it is cheaper, of course, to live in a home with several people. If there's like a 4-bedroom unit, then your rent would be substantially cheaper than if you were looking at an apartment or a 1-bedroom bachelor. Of course, there are benefits to living with roommates and there are benefits to living alone. So you really need to look within yourself of where you feel you best thrive. There are some people that really do benefit in a communal setting where they have 3 roommates, where, you know, they could have potlucks or cook-offs or anything of that nature. But there are some people like introverts who really do benefit and are their best selves when they do live alone. And so it's really trying to balance what you're able to afford versus what would make you most successful in your housing and in your studies. So trying to take that into consideration. Fanshawe also has a lot of job boards as well that students are able to apply for work if costs are going to be, you feel a little bit higher. So typically, when you're renting a unit, costs up front are typically first and last month's rent. Last month's rent is a deposit. First month's rent could be, and mostly now is required by landlords to be paid for, but technically they should just be receiving could be receiving a post-dated check. But nowadays, everyone is just providing first and last month's rent. Housing is pretty precarious and pretty hard to find in terms of what best suits you in London, Ontario. And so a lot of landlords do request a lot of additionals, which then, for example, a landlord had requested that a family pay 8 months rent in advance. So then that way they would ensure that they would get that unit, and they were international. It was an international family as well. And so while that is not 100% illegal, it is a lot for a landlord to ask for that. So if a landlord is asking you for such things, please feel free to reach out to inquire if that's okay to do, not okay to do, or if there's gray area within that as well. So also a lot of landlords will require housing insurance. So typically there's a couple companies that you're able to use. You just look online. Some actually are provided through your bank. So try to look through your bank as well if that's something that they provide. But this is just something that will protect you in terms of a fire or a flood or anything, a natural disaster, a break-in, anything of that. It's about $600 per year. So there are options where you can pay that housing insurance monthly or just altogether annual in one lump sum. But most of them are requiring that as a means for you to move in. Now, this is because this is taking a little bit of liability and financial responsibility off of the landlord. And this is really just to help you protect your own things. So, insuring your computer, your clothes, and your valuables. So if something were to happen, then you would be able to seek that through insurance and receive those costs back. So, secondly, I think it's really important. The people that you live with, as I had mentioned earlier, it does come with some pros and cons. So, it is very exciting to move in with new people. A lot of students do come in with the idea of, being very excited to move to like a new place and to have roommates. But unfortunately, there are some roommate breakdowns that do happen. And so, like I said earlier, I'm able to help mediate those situations. But in some cases, a lot of students will say, I can't, my roommate stays up and talks on the phone till like 11 p.m. at night or 12 p.m. at night, or my roommate wakes up really early and that disrupts my sleep because I have a late class, so I'm able to sleep in. And so some people are requesting that I get them out of the lease. So I will be saying this quite a lot throughout this presentation is that once you are in a lease, it is very, very, very difficult to get out of that lease. So you would need to be experiencing quite a high crisis in terms of violence or unsafety in order to even entertain getting out of the lease. And so it's really important that like when you're moving with new people that you start off from the get-go with a very common understanding of how you want to live, but also you might have to be understanding about how somebody else wants to live. And so, if you're staying in a 4-unit place, you're all paying the same amount of rent. You all have the same rights and responsibilities as tenants, but you all also have equal ownership of the space in which you live as well. And so it's very hard when individuals come to me saying, I don't like my roommate. I don't want to live with him anymore. Get me out of the lease. It's not that easy. It's very, very difficult. In fact, the success rate is very, very low in order to do that. So I just want to make sure that if you are moving in with new people, that you have a common understanding of how you love to live, how they love to live, and if this is something that you're able to both work on together or as a full unit work on together. So if you are on a lease with several other people, collaboratively, you are responsible for the entire unit. So you would be primarily responsible for your room in which you are sleeping in. So that is what you pay for individually. And then common spaces as well will always be up for conversation if something were to happen in a common space where then people would share equal responsibility of that common space. So that's why it's very important to have a good understanding with your roommates. Like you don't need to be best friends and you don't need to hang out every single day, but it is something that you need to have a common ground on how to live throughout the year in your housing. So one good thing about roommates is that you could create a roommate agreement with your roommates, and that could be shared responsibilities. That could be how they're divvying up the cost. For example, in some cases, there might be internet that you have to pay for where that it's under one person's name. And so that one person would pay for the rent, but then you would have to work out how you pay that one person for your portion of the rent, or sorry, I meant of the internet as well. So any utilities, anything of that nature, you'd have to work out through a roommate agreement with your roommates. So Um, we partnered with Places for Students, so that's a really good place to start off looking for housing if you're still in search for housing. So this is something that's a little bit more reputable than Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji. There are a lot of fake ads and so forth that go on Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace, so we can talk about that in a bit. But try to use Places for Students. So far, it's been really successful for students. Be very leery, like I said, of buy and sell groups. Anybody can post on those, and so it's very hard for one to discern whether or not that is something that is real or fake. Some people, for example, their parents will be on vacation, and some people can go pretend that their parents' house is up for lease, tour people, take the first and last month's rent, and then bail. And then really the people haven't signed a lease or anything of that nature. And so really then the parents come back from vacation and they see these people trying to move into their home. That's a very real thing that has happened within London and across the world. So just to be careful of that. Also, it's really important if you really find a very cool place that you like, it might not be near Fanshawe College. So whether that's St. Thomas, Woodstock, Simcoe, London. And so I just provided the link to the London Transit. Specifically, if you are looking in other areas, try to go on their transit website too to see what a bus route looks like. So for example, in all my travels across the world, I would say that London's transportation system is probably like in the lower half of like quality service. So like there are subways and buses in some countries that come every 2 minutes, but in Canada, it's usually every 15, 30, or 45 minutes. So it's really important that you're planning your housing around your travel around to campus because some people don't mind a long bus ride, but some people do. And in some cases, you might actually have to transfer, meaning that you have to get off the bus, wait for another bus, and then come to the college. But in some cases, if your bus is late, then you've missed the second bus, at which point you could be late for class. So it's very important that you are looking for places that are conducive to your lifestyle, but also your transportation expectations as well. Also, like it's really important that when you're looking for places that if you have a house, you're renting a house with somebody, while the landlord is responsible for shoveling and all of that on the outside, sometimes landlords don't live in the city, and so upkeep is a little harder once it comes to houses. Once you're renting in an apartment, that's a lot easier because the apartment takes care of everything in or around the building. So just try to discern too, like do you like to live in tall buildings? Are you wanting a backyard? Anything of that nature. But if, for example, you think the grass is too long, the landlord might not think it's too long and might come cut it a week from now. So really also trying to manage those expectations as well. It's also important too that we have what the accommodations have what you like. Some people do not mind going to a laundromat, but not all places are inclusive of a washer and dryer. So like I lived in South Korea for 4 years. All I had was a washer. So then I had to hang dry all of my clothing. I still hang dry my clothing to this day because of that. But there are some people who don't mind going to a laundromat. There are some individuals who do want in-suite laundry, but I will say the more appliances that are included into your rental agreement, that makes things more expensive. So places without laundry are typically cheaper than those with laundry. Some buildings have community laundry that you're able to use cash for, but that will be an additional cost as well. If you're looking for a dishwasher or anything fancy like that, or a really big a clawfoot bathtub. Of course, those little things that might be additional to the cost of the per month. So also just trying to determine what you feel you need and what you're able to do outside of your studies in terms of completing your laundry or doing tasks like dishes and so forth. Um, Also really important that before you move in, it's that you take pictures of the unit. A lot of landlords will try to say that the damage was incurred by yourself, but you would have proof of your living room, at least your bedroom and your kitchen area and bathroom, to make sure that you have that upon first day of move-in. That's very important. So then that way you're able to provide those photos. Make sure that the photos have a timestamp. I know that with iPhones, they provide an internal timestamp, but make sure that you're also doing that as well. Make sure that a lot of the units, it is mandatory that they have smoke and CO2 detectors and escape routes. So, some landlords will try to rent out a bedroom with no windows. That is illegal. Every bedroom that you have should have a a window attached to it. Do not take the place sight unseen. I think a lot of people, I do love everyone's trust and what's the word? Trust in Canadians and that we are very kind people, but unfortunately that's not the case. So there are some people here that are providing units without sight unseen, which then that could be fake. It could not be the unit that you rent, and then unfortunately you've signed a lease to live somewhere that is not up to your standards. So make sure that if you are doing any communications with landlords, that you can ask the landlord to provide you with a virtual tour of the unit. It's very important that you see a door number, anything of that nature that makes sure that you're connecting to the unit that you're actually going into. So again, do not take the place sight unseen. A lot of these things do seem repetitive, but just from my experience so far in housing, these are what are the common threads of like what people are experiencing. It's also pretty cool that if you are renting to from a landlord with students, that you're able to ask the students to provide a reference. I think it's only fair that landlords ask us to provide references, and so we should be able to ask the landlord for references too. So if there's an icky feeling that you have, or if there's something in your head that you're like, I don't know about this, then just try to ask the landlord to speak to its current tenant there to ask how the situation is. A good landlord will say, absolutely no problem, and then give you that. A bad landlord would say that's none of your business, and that should be a very big sign that you should not be renting from them. Landlords should be happy and proud to sell you the product that they're selling you. So make sure that you are asking that because that's within your right to ask for a reference. So there are a lot of leases that are occurring. So some of you are in 2-year programs. Most of you are in 2-year programs. There are places that are offering 3-year leases, at which point that would be a discussion with the landlord to see if you could take that down to a 2-year lease, because many of you might not still remain in London. You might go back home or move somewhere else in Canada in order to do so. So 3-year leases are very tricky. The standard lease is a 12-month lease. So you would pay first and last month's rent, and then you would be there for the 4 months. And then on the last month, you would not have to pay the rent unless you continue to rent there month to month thereafter. So your last month always is the last month that you reside in that place. Always make sure that this abides by the Residential Tenancies Act. So there's Ontario rental law, there's the Landlord Tenant Board. I think that if you have any questions regarding it, the Landlord Tenant Board is a huge website. It's a huge bureau in terms of Canada. So I would love to go over it, but it would be probably a 2-day class just on the basics. So if you do have any questions about whether or not your lease does comply with the landlord tenant or the Residential Tenancies Act, please let me know, and I'd be happy to go over it with you. I'm also happy to meet virtually. I really understand that you are all in different time frames, so happy to accommodate as much as I can given your time change until you're here in Canada. And then, of course, there are separate leases versus joint lease. So if you are moving in with your partner, you both could be on the lease. But if there is a breakdown in your relationship with your friend or your partner, you still both are responsible for that lease. So it's also very important that while you're young, you might feel confident that the relationship's strong enough to live in a unit, and that's fantastic, but also recognizing that you both are equally responsible for the lease. Some landlords require a guarantor. So a guarantor is somebody who has really good credit. That if, for example, if you are unable to pay your rent, then the landlord would go after the guarantor to pay for that rent. There are some apartment buildings that are pretty good apartment buildings that don't require international students to have a guarantor. So I'm working with an apartment building right now that does that. And so they require a guarantor for domestics, but not for international students. So also, if your parents are able to be a guarantor, or somebody that you live with, or you have family members here, you would have to ask them to be your guarantor, and that they would be financially responsible for your rent and or any damages that might occur in the apartment that are not considered everyday wear and tear. Also just making sure that you get it in writing that you've signed your lease. They have 21 days to get the lease to you, making sure that you are also provided rental receipts as well. Rental receipts are very important. Here, it's really important in terms of us claiming our taxes. And so also it might be helpful for you or your family as well to have those rental receipts. So make sure that every month your landlord is providing you with that. If you decide to pay cash monthly, that's a-okay, but you need to get a receipt. So I would get the receipt. You have to meet the hands in terms of the rent and the rental receipt. Try not to have the landlord say, oh, I'll get it back to you or I'll email it to you. You need to find a way where you can make sure that that cash that you gave them was for the rent. And so whether that's for text to say like, yes, I confirmed the rent, that way at least you have proof of that and then you can get the receipt later. But never let a landlord say, okay, I'll email you the receipt. Try to get that as quick as possible. Again, if you are unaware of your lease, I'm happy to meet with you virtually to go over the lease to make sure everything's okay. So we do a lease review. It's like I said over and over, it's so hard to get out of a lease. So this is a really big decision that you're making. And so just so everyone's aware, let's say, for example, you sign a lease and you decide you don't want to live there anymore. And then you go live with a friend, well, then that landlord can take you to the landlord tenant board, and they also can file collections through the government of Canada or through Ontario for you to pay back that rent. So it's really important that you understand that this is a legally binding document that is very hard to break. And so if it wasn't, people would be moving all the time, and it would be really hard to manage. But just understanding of the consequences of signing a lease and what you understand you're fully entitled to. I mean, I think I've talked about this as well. A lot of places will let you know when garbage day is and recycle day is, so make sure that you're aware of that. They would be responsible to providing you a blue bin and like a garbage can in order to do that. Try to create a group chat with all of your roommates. So I'm not saying again you need to be best friends with all of them, but try to create just a housing group chat just specific to housing. So if you have a separate group chat regarding social things, keep that in a separate group chat, but try to keep a group chat that is just specific to your housing. So that way nothing gets lost in between all the memes and the links and the LOLs and the ha ha ha's of being social. So just try to have one group chat specific to housing related issues. And then again, try to do chores, anything of that nature, a chore chart. I know that sounds like you're treating you like, you're 5 years old, but sometimes like when I make spaghetti at night, I don't want to do the dishes because I've just like cooked for like 45 minutes to a half hour. But then if I don't want to do them, I'm the only one responsible to clean that up. And so if somebody were to come down the next day and see my whole mess, I can't understand why someone might be upset by that when they're trying to use the oven or they're trying to use the stove. And so it's very important that you're with people who understand that about you, but also keeping a tidy home. So like I said, record any issues. All windows are required to have screens. Make sure to do a video when you move in with your phone. Take photos. If there's anything that you feel needs to be fixed or repaired, contact that landlord immediately. Don't let it go a day or two without, or a day or five without, because then they could say, well, that happened within the 5 days that you were there. So you need to make sure that you do a full run through when you move into the place. Also, there are some particular instances where there are some apartments or houses that have rodents or like cockroaches, anything of that nature. If you sign a lease and you see a cockroach, that does not get you out of the lease. So if the landlord is being proactive in trying to remove all of the rodents or some of the rodents from your house, that is enough underneath the Landlord Tenant Board and Residential Tenancies Act. And so please don't just pack up and leave and go sign a lease for somebody else, because that means you would be responsible for two leases. All properties with 4 units need to be registered. So if you're really curious, most landlords will register their address as a business. And so you can use this website to see places that you're looking for to see if they're registered via the City of London. This is really important because if landlords are registering within the City of London, it means that they're likely running a pretty okay business in terms of wanting to make sure that they keep that status, but also keep their tenants happy. So just some flags here. As I said, heat should be 20 degrees during the day and 18 at night. So that's kind of the wavering of that's kind of the comfort zone for landlords given by the Ontario government. Water, so they must provide water, so hot and cold. And like I said earlier, bug and rodent removal. So they are responsible for that. They're also responsible for if it snows, shoveling, the driveway or anything of that nature, the sidewalks around the place. Some landlords might offer to pay you to do that yourself, but then that is the liability and responsibility that now you're taking on behalf of that. And so you would need to make sure that you and your landlord have a good relationship in order for that to be at least feasible. Like I said, be aware of scams. It's very important. Do a FaceTime. Do Google Street View. I love Google Street View. So if you're looking for a place, try to look for the house on Google and do the live map to see what it looks like. Look for the street address. You have to make sure the landlord's actually locking or unlocking the door from the outer view. So, or at least locking, because that would indicate they actually have ownership of the place more over than others. And then, like I said, ask to contact current tenants to the landlord to see if it's okay. Ultimately, I just think that housing is the most important, one of the most important parts when you're receiving your education. I've received a lot of students who are struggling with their mental health and therefore struggling with their studies regarding issues with their roommates and issues with their landlords. And some people could potentially fail a class because of the struggles that they're having within their home. And so your housing is very important in terms of a foundation of how well you can do within the space. Some students avoid going to their house because of their roommates, and that's not cool either, because you pay to be there just as much as your roommates do. So just making sure that you're taking the proper steps so you're happy and healthy that while you're studying here at Fanshawe College. So if you have any questions, like I said, my name is Jason Galindo. Off-campus housing at fanshawec.ca is where you can email me. My extension is there at 16913. And then up top is just a link to places for students where you could start your housing search if you haven't done so already. And I believe that's it.
Thank you, Jason. So previously we've been using the raise your hand feature. So if you want to do that for questions, I have monitored the chats and there's not been chats related to housing. So there's no
Great.
questions there as of right now, but I'll keep watching the chat. And if you want to go ahead and answer the first raised hands.
I don't know if they're in order, but I'll start with the MASH Academy.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, sir. Are you fine?
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. So I have actually chosen accommodation, and I hope I'm clear. There are no interruptions when I'm speaking right now.
I think my volume is just a little low, so you might just see my ear close to the computer.
Okay. So actually, I did found an accommodation near to Fanshawe College, which is just 15 minutes away from the Simcoe campus. Here, the tenant doesn't have any lease agreement upon me, as I have chosen the basement part of it. It is also it's like a virtual agreement, and I did had virtual too, and I had a friend near to that home. He had a personal meetup with the landlord and looked up the place, and it was genuine. Now here's the question: when I had to pay the money, she did ask me that I have to pay the first and last month, which I think is actually correct, and she also asked me for a dime, like she's calculating per day into time. So I'm arriving to Canada by December 12th. So from that day onwards, she's calculating in a multiplied, and I don't know, like $27 per day or something. And then she has given me a total amount to be sent by $1,637, which also includes $200 as a security deposit, as if any damage is caused in the caused by me, or the water problems or if there are any issues related to housing, she can help me out and she's ready to make any improvements in it. Do you think that money, especially $200 for security, is manageable, or is it a right amount to be asked for a tenant? So that's my question.
I want to say this seems like an offline conversation because this seems quite there's a lot of parts here to this. So I'm happy to meet offline. It's just, did you say I just don't want to have this conversation in front of so many people unless you're comfortable doing so. But I'm happy to set a virtual meeting. Like all of that sounds okay. I just am worried just about the document in which you're signed, or the lack of document in which you've signed. So would you want to meet offline for that? Because that's multiple questions. I want to make sure I'm just providing you the right advice.
Yes, I will be coming to Canada by December 12th, and I'm actually ready to send the money to them before actually, having my accommodation there.
Okay. Have you signed the lease?
No, there is no lease actually. It's just a draft agreement that she has sent it to me. Maybe I can actually send it to you through email.
If you could, because if you're not under a lease, then you're not protected. And that's the problem, right? So she could take the money, and if you don't have a lease agreement signed, then she could ask you to leave whenever, right? Like that's why it's really important that you have some sort of standard lease attached to it, because now you're sending her a lot of money without any sort of signature attached to it, which then is very concerning on your behalf.
Yes, and the one thing she did send it to me was like an entire agreement which included a space for date as well as signature. And I still haven't signed it because I do know about this lease thing because one of my friends did told me and informed me regarding it. So I will just send it to you, the agreement, so that I can look forward onto it.
Yes, please don't send any money before you've signed something and that they've signed something.
Okay, I haven't signed on anything, to be honest. I just wanted to make.
Great. And then don't send any money either. So okay. So then you can send that to me and I can let you know. But that's a really good question, because the thing is with places like Simcoe, it's a very rural area. And so sometimes they try not to, sometimes like in small towns are like, no, this is how it happens in small towns. But I think specifically for international students, there should be sort of a law-abiding umbrella that would be helping support you to make sure you're protected. So please send that along and I'd be able to help.
Is clearing my doubt.
Carlos?
Hi, morning. Question for international students, right? And I see you have to sign a form in order to apply for a dorm. How long does it normally take before you get accepted?
Yeah, so I'm not the residence. I don't work within residence. That's something that's on campus, specific, not off campus. But if I can send you, if you wanted to email the off-campus housing email, I would be able to connect you with the person that would be most appropriate for that.
Sorry, the actual best option, because for international students, it does come through Fanshawe Cares. So it actually comes through our programs. So if you could send us an email to fanshawcares@fanshawc.ca, and we can send you the application and then follow up with residents. And right now it might be a bit delayed because rooms will only open up in residence as students leave. So they might not know yet for sure the spaces they'll have and stuff, but please send us that email to fanshawcares@fanshawc.ca and we can follow up.
Great. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, because I wanted to know because I start for January 6th, and me and my mother been waiting to see like how does the residency work before she leaves.
Please send us an email and then we can follow up because it's going to be on a case by case basis as well to depend on space that opens.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Apologize if I mispronounced this incorrectly, but Zakia?
Hello, good morning. I would like to know one thing. You said first month and last month lease rent. That means we have to pay the whole year amount?
No, so first and last, and then monthly you pay on the first. Or whatever day you move in. So you don't need to pay the whole year.
So we have to pay every month,
Monthly, yeah.
monthly, yeah.
Yeah.
And any advance to be given?
Just the so the last month's rent's the deposit, and some landlords require first month's with the last month's rent. So if you move into, let's say
That's what
January.
I didn't get first month rent and last month rent means suppose I move into $800 apartment. So I'll have to pay 1,600 as a amount deposit.
Right. So typically it's you pay the $800 on the first of the day that you move in. Some landlords are requiring that upon like lease signing, which like isn't wrong, but it's not right or wrong. Like technically they should only be depositing your last month's rent. But for you, if you pay in advance, then if you move in January 1st, then if you pay first and last, then the next month would be February 1st.
Oh, then last month we don't have to pay.
The last month, if you're there for 1 year, so let's say you move in January 1st, then and you're moving out the next January 1st, then you would not pay December.
Only not pay December.
Yes.
Okay, then starting I'll have to pay for that's in other words I'll have to pay 2 months rent. 800 plus 800.
From the beginning, yes.
Yeah, from the beginning. I'll have to pay 2 months rent, and then last 12th month I don't have to pay.
Yes, but if you stay in that unit for another year,
then I'll have to continue paying.
Yes, and then it's the very last month you leave that you don't pay.
You don't pay. Oh, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, again, apologize, Asbontin? No. Agbonton?
Yes, if we just want to move on to the next person.
Okay, I was gonna say,
and we can come back.
Uzair?
Hello, am I audible?
Kind of. I think it's my computer actually, but yeah, I'll just put my ear to the speaker.
Maybe I can change my mic. Is the audio better now?
That's better.
For me, yeah.
Okay, cool. So my question was related to early termination of lease. So for example, I find a place, I move into the place and I sign a lease agreement for like, let's say 1 year period. And then 3-4 months down the line, I discover another place that I want to move into. So can I terminate the lease early without any penalties or repercussions?
No, absolutely not. So in your lease that you sign, it's for 1 year. And in the lease, it'll say you can give 60 days notice, but that 60 days is for after you've completed the year. So let's say, for example, you move January 1st and you want to move out the next January 1st, then you have to give 60 days on November 1st. So you can't terminate a lease early. You can't do that. So what you would have to do is you would have to ask your landlord if if they were able to sublet the apartment, and then you would be responsible to find a sublet for the apartment.
Right. All right, that makes sense.
Is that it? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I'm having some audio problems. I said that, yeah, that's okay. I understand that.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you.
Ratio?
Hey there. I had a question related to the lease.
Okay.
You're mentioning, like when you're renting a room, you need to need
You're cutting out, my friend.
to allow you
Ratio, we're actually not able to hear almost anything of what you're saying. I'm gonna try to
Ratio.
log back in.
Yeah, or email me.
my God. Am I audible now?
Let's try one more time.
Okay, so my question was related to the lease. So you mentioned that if I'm trying to rent a room, apparently if I don't sign any kind of lease, the landlord at any given. So what kind of lease should I look for if I'm to room? And I won't leave it in future just in case I don't like the room.
I think from what I heard was most landlords are using an Ontario standard an Ontario standard lease. So it should stay above top Ontario standard lease with the Ontario government header. So anything that does not have that, I would be suspicious of using that. Alicia?
That is great.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry. I'm just trying to go through the hands above first. So can we go with Alicia? Okay, I'll move on. Principal?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, good afternoon. Sorry, I'm using my time. What I wanted to ask was, if someone was going to come about booking a room months ahead, let's say you're supposed to be in January set and your admission got deferred until May, is it good to book a room down with one of those listings from like for places for students to come? That's what I want to just understand. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to understand how the booking process is going to be for students who are going to be going towards in the May set. Is it smart to book early enough, or is it better to book around the time that they're about to come?
So if you're looking for May, there's a lot of cycles once it comes to housing, like a lot of open spots. So there's a lot of open spots around this time in January, and then a lot of open spots around April and May, and then a lot of open spots well, it gets very competitive in August. So if you're coming in May, you should be good to look for units around
Voy a hacer una
March,
pregunta ahorita.
April.
¿Qué quieres preguntar?
Sorry, if I could just ask that if you're not the one currently speaking, if you could please remain muted.
Sure, sorry.
Thank you.
Did you hear me, Principal?
I didn't get the last part.
Oh, so you should be good if you're coming in May for a deferral to look for a place in March, April, because there usually are a lot of openings for May.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so so it's not really in order. Ruth,
Hi, good morning.
hi.
Yes, I went through some property website or property rental website within London area, and some of the requirements that they were asking if you wanna rent or you wanna get that property is what they call the credit report. So can you tell us about this credit report, how to get this, or yeah, that's it. I just wanna know about this credit report.
Sure. So, or international students wouldn't have a credit report from Canada. And so that's typically what they're asking for people to rent their places. And so you can always reach out. There are some places that don't require international students to have a credit report or like good credit. So there's good credit, bad credit, medium credit. And so if they do need something in terms of a credit report or something to ensure that you will pay rent, then they will ask for the guarantor. So that'll be somebody that you know, your family members or your friends, either where you live now or in Canada, just as an added benefit to the landlord to make sure that their property will be okay.
So if I do not have that credit report or any guarantor because I don't have any family or friends in Canada, they won't give me the rent or the lease, correct?
They say, I mean, they put that as a stipulation, but I think primarily they do that to people domestically, like within London, Ontario. So it's worth an ask. It's still worth applying. It doesn't hurt you to apply, but if they ask, then if that's something you cannot provide, then I would move on. But I could always look for landlords or provide people with landlords that don't ask international students for credit checks, but still apply because they might just be meaning that for domestic or local people.
Okay, thank you.
Jermaine?
Yes, hello. I was
Hi.
wondering, I think I didn't get the part of when you can you listen to me?
I can hear you.
Okay. The part you were speaking about, the when you don't sign a lease, like it's more like a informal, like I pay you and you get to live here. If I don't get a receipt back as part of the process, um, what are the consequences of what am I not going to be aware if I don't have the receipt, the record of me being a tenant of that place?
Well, if you don't have a lease, then they can kick you out any day. It's kind of like staying at a hotel room, right? So if you book a hotel room for a week, the hotel can still ask you to leave the next day. That's within their right to do that. And so typically they won't provide you rental receipts if there's no lease, because what will happen is it's the rental receipt will show the address or should show the address of the person you're living with. And if they don't have a lease, that means there is a reason why they can't rent or should not rent their place. And so if people file taxes or word gets out, then they could be fined a lot of money for renting to you. So that's why they wouldn't provide the rental receipt.
Oh, I understand. Oh, that's really dense, honestly.
Yeah, it's sad, eh?
Thank you.
Thank you. Jemmy?
Hi, so my question is, for instance, I get an apartment and it's not on a lease contract. You don't need to sign any lease, but the landlord asks for first and last month's payments. And bear in mind, I plan on spending like 3 months there. So if after 3 months, what's going to happen to my last month's rent? Am I going to get it back? Like, is landlord going to refund it back to me?
If there's no lease, then it's you're putting a lot of faith in a stranger to give you back that money, right? Like if there's no words or there's no agreement, then they could give you back the last month's rent. If you're there for 3 months, they could give you that for last month's rent. So if you pay first and last, you'd only have to pay 1 month in between, but you would need to trust that the landlord will fulfill that if there's no lease or agreement, right?
Okay, if there's no lease agreement, is it advisable to opt in for to pay like first and last month's rent?
Well, because there's no lease, essentially you're not playing within or out of the law, right? So they can ask you whatever. So if you're going to provide the first and last month's rent and there's no lease, then they don't need to follow the law because there is no law being followed. So it's just without any sort of agreement, you're kind of making a handshake agreement. And so you would follow within the terms of the handshake agreement.
Okay, thank you.
I believe I did Uzair already. Loveland? Oh, Uzair.
Sorry, Jason, I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
So you clarified regarding the lease that I cannot really terminate it. I can only sublet it to someone else if I need to move out.
If the landlord says that you can't.
Right. What if I occupy a place and I am the person that is being sublet? So for example, someone I know is already leasing a place and they sublet the place to me. So
Yeah.
would the same sort of restrictions, like, are there any restrictions on me as being on a sublease, I'd say? If I plan to move out of that place in like a couple of months, can I do that?
You can ask the person that you're subletting from, because ultimately the responsibility to the landlord is the person that you are subletting from, right? So there is no additional agreement between you and the landlord. It's that person and the landlord. So let's say, for example, you're subletting from a place and you're like, I'm not paying this month's rent. That person would have to pay the landlord rent and then come after you for the rent, right? So as long as the person you're subletting from allows you to do that, then that's okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Uzair.
I have a question. Can I ask?
I was going to call you second, but you've been persistent, so sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a website that is known as University Living. They provide accommodation to international students. So they were asking for some $99 application fee with 25% of rent first, and they will provide the accommodation after that. So I just wanted to know that University Living, a website, is true or not? Can we move further with that website?
I've never heard of that website. I would have to look into that, but I've never heard of it.
Okay, so can I share that link to your email address?
You can, sure, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Loveland? Loveland? Philip? Philip? I can't hear you, Philip, if you're trying to talk. But if you're not, that's okay too. I think, all right. Well, please feel free to email me, anybody, if you have any following questions. And then I will always make sure if it's a residence thing to refer you back to where Crystal said to send. But I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all the information and answering all these questions.
No problem. No problem. And anything I can do to help to reach out, please feel free to use that email. I mean, if I get 200 emails, it might take a while for me to respond, but yeah, happy to help you with whatever you need to make sure that you are living in a good place.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for attending, and thank you again for the session today. And please make sure that you all are joining us back tomorrow. It is our last day of the Fanshawe Care series, and we're going to be talking to our team from our Fanshawe Online department, and they're going to go over how to use that platform for all of your academic uses. So thank you, everybody, and have a lovely day or evening, and we'll see you back tomorrow. Thank you.
I have one last question. Can you repeat your email address? I think I missed it.
Yes.
It's off-campus housing, one word, at fanshawec.ca.
Perfect.
If you don't mind,
Perfect.
can you
Thank you
send
so
it on
much.
the
Thank
chat?
Just putting it in the chat right now.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much, man.
Okay, have a good day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.